Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 66, in which we will be discussing the mysterious Daniel David Skyfall. But before we do, I have three announcements that I need to make that are very, very important. The first is an update and an apology and an announcement all wrapped together. So let's start first with the apology and then the update. I am sorry for uploading episodes so sporadically. I am doing the best I can, just so you guys know what's going on. About 3 weeks ago, a very powerful producer from my past came across Sir No Face and Two Face the Gray and happened to watch them back to back. This person contacted me and wanted to talk more about the story. And to be honest, I think he wanted to feel me out to see if this was all real. And he quickly discovered that it was, in which he wants to help me get the story out to the world through a much larger distribution vehicle than we currently use. Now, the way it works in Hollywood, if you want to release something on an HBO or an Amazon or a Netflix, one of the hardest things to do is just to get somebody to listen to you and just see your vision and actually take the time to look at your work, because they're inundated with 1,000 projects a day, 1 million new ideas. So it's really hard just to get somebody to focus on what you have going on. Thankfully, that has happened for us. And in order to take Sir No Face, Two Face, and the forthcoming Pale Face project to that kind of global, worldwide, in-your-face level, there are some things that had to happen. First off, and I apologize in advance as well for not being able to give you all the information, but this is obviously business, and there's certain things you can and can't talk about. But what I can tell you is this producer saw what we're doing and saw the natural progression of it and said to me, this is becoming a docu-series, don't you? And it is. It was never meant to be that, but it's become that. So part of the idea here was to shoot Paleface, but also break Sir No Face and Two Face down into multiple episodes so that it can be an episodic docuseries. Now, in order to do that, we need, to edit it where you have like a couple episodes to make up Sir No Face, and how does that look and feel? And from there, you also need a sizzle reel, which is basically a long commercial that kind of shows what the series would look like from start to finish, where you use partially concept pieces. What this all basically means is a ton of editing to present a total package to these larger distributors. We know that there is one right now that we would love to work with that is in fact already interested based upon just seeing the trailers. So I've been on a timetable to finish this by July 1st. It's very exciting for us because I want this story out there to everyone. I think what we're experiencing is truly crazy stuff that I can't even believe exists half the time. And I also think that, to be honest, public awareness kind of feels like protection right now. And I think the safest way for us to move forward is to make sure we have as many eyes on this story as possible. With that being the case, on top of everything else that I'm doing, I'm up against this July 1st deadline to do an insurmountable amount of editing. So that's why I am working so freaking hard at keeping the podcast still going every few days, but then spending as much time as I can to make sure that by July 1st, they have everything they need, which they will for sure. But this also brings me to my second announcement, which is that I am moving the online release date for Phantom Rider, which is June 28th, back to the DVD release date for Phantom Rider, which is July 28th. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm documenting this entire part of this real life story that's playing out, which is that this producer from my past came back into my life and wants to help us get this story out. Now, people just don't get a chance to see what this process is like and how things make it to larger distribution. And it's very, very interesting. And as it goes on, trust me, some very weird things have already happened. And I just want everyone to see our process of getting the story out there to the world. That's a very, very important thing for me. So you guys can see the inside, kind of pulling back the veil and saying, once you have a story like this and once you're involved in something like this, how do you get it to the world? How do you get it to where, 40 countries can watch what you're doing? And, it's just a very interesting process, and the camera has rarely ever been taken there. So I want to include that in Phantom Rider, because Phantom Rider itself sets up my return to Australia to hopefully go on what will be the final chapter of this story, getting as much truth as we can about what we're experiencing out there to the world, and also getting as many answers as we can as to what occurred with Craig on Cockatoo Island and what did he film and what was actually going on during that time period. Okay, so the process of getting Paleface made and getting distribution on a larger level, it's a very important part of the story that is going to be included in Phantom Rider. With that being the case, I just need more time to document it. So most of that film is already, is done at this point. But again, I'm currently documenting what we're doing right now, which is also what makes this such a special project, is this is the closest thing you're ever going to see to real time. I mean, when this comes out, the events that are in Phantom Rider are probably going to be a week old. That's it. So it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And the final announcement that I have for you guys is about the In a Crowded Room podcast. As I've told you guys, I absolutely want to keep this podcast free and will keep it free for as long as it runs. But I've still been toying with ideas and ways to get past the fact that anything that is, conspiratorial at all is just being demonetized by YouTube. Plus, many of you that follow me have informed me that you're not getting notifications or that my episodes are not appearing on your favorites list. This is very common after looking into it. Anything on the web right now that has to do with anything with conspiracies or anything like that are kind of suffering this fate. So I've been looking for alternative ways to keep the podcast free, but to also, generate revenue to hire a junior editor, so I can just record the podcast and have the junior editor handle the editing and the posting. And I think a really cool way to do that is what I'm going to be launching on July 4th, which is In a Crowded Room presents American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details, presented by the In a Crowded Room podcast. So what is The Devil in the Details? It's actually going to be a 10-episode, 20-hour-long podcast series that is all about my family's original haunting. If you've seen the American Ghost Hunter documentary, there's so much to the story that nobody knows, starting with the fact that I have a sister. Why was my sister not included in the American Ghost Hunter documentary? You'll find all of this out in the Devil in the Details series. There's so much more to the haunting that took place. There was actually a murder and a death that took place in my family's house. Why was that not included in the American Ghost Hunter documentary? You'll find this out as well. There's so much stuff that's in here that nobody knows. I've already recorded actually the first 3 episodes, which is the first 6 hours, but I think it's going to be best to just release one every week starting on July 4th. And how this will work is it's a separate side purchase. So the In a Crowded Room podcast will continue on for free, and off the AGH TV website, you can purchase the entire series for American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details, which if you purchase it in the next 24 hours, you will save $10 off the entire series. To check out all the details associated with this, click the link in the description box below. It will take you to AGH Television, where you can make your purchase. And then on July 4th, you will be emailed the first episode to the American Ghost Hunter, Devil in the Details series. And then every 7 days after that, you will receive a new episode for the following 10 weeks. I think you guys will really dig this. Like I said, it's a separate thing on the side. It keeps the podcast itself free. But for those that want more and want to dig deep into my family's history and my story, your support will go to the hiring of a junior editor, which in turn will give you more free content as well on the In a Crowded Room podcast. Having said all of that, guys, thank you for your time and listening to the updates. Let's jump in to episode number 66 on the mysterious Daniel David Skyfall. Now, if you have not seen Two-Face the Gray, you might be wondering, who in the hell is Daniel David Skyfall? And I'll tell you the story how I actually came to discover this person, because in the Two-Face the Gray documentary, I skim over it pretty quickly. But what happened is I get a lot of emails all the time from people that watch my work and have thoughts and ideas and are genuinely trying to help. And they send me those thoughts and ideas. I don't always get a chance to read all of them. A lot of times it's just that. People just saying, hey, have you ever thought of this? Or I saw this, or check this out. And I sincerely appreciate that stuff, because I look at the public as like the lifeline in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You know, if you source the public for answers, typically you actually get a pretty good result. So whenever I get emails that are point specific, at the very least, I try to give them, a look. I was up super late one night and I get an email from a gentleman that says his name is Daniel David Skyfall. And this email was more than an email. It was a book. I mean, it was so long. And there were so many links to videos and references to things throughout history. I mean, there's no way that someone, could put this together without spending a lot of time. I mean, a lot of time. And what it was is pretty much this historical survey of, human beings' encounters with aliens, their role in kind of, history starting from the 1930s up to now. He referenced a much deeper history, which was kind of in line with the legend and lore of the Anunnaki. It was so incredibly detailed, I just couldn't put it down. And I ended up reading this entire thing. Now, again, if you've seen Two-Face the Gray, you know that I included this story that was in this email in the movie. And it's a fairly long segment. And what's crazy is the segment that's in Two-Face the Gray is about half of what he sent me. I just chose the historical points that I found to be the most fascinating. Now, what's really weird is this gentleman claimed, Daniel David Skyfall, which dare I say that's not his birth name, he claimed that he worked for a dark agency. And what I mean by dark, if you've seen the Stephen Greer documentary, Unacknowledged, I believe this is what he's referencing, meaning an agency that works within the government, but they're decompartmentalized, so nobody really knows who they are, but they're highly funded and they can kind of move and do what they choose. And he claimed that his job was disinformation in regard to UFOs and aliens, that when people really filmed things or when people had legitimate stories, it was initially his job to confuse people, to make people not believe, to make people look stupid, to create enough diversion by using disinformation to simply muddy the story up so much that nobody can tell if it's true or not anymore. But he said once he learned what he was actually a part of and what the goal was, he realized that he was doing a lot of damage, and he is trying to essentially right his wrongs. Now, I've been asked many times by people who have seen Two-Face the Gray, do you have a hard time trusting Daniel David Skyfall? And the answer is fuck yes. I mean, I didn't know And I've told him this, I've responded in emails, and this is really weird. When I get an email from him, every time it's from a new email address. When I respond to the email and send it back, I immediately get an email saying that my email failed, that it was non-delivered. But when he writes me back, he clearly received the email because he still gets the information. So I don't know what kind of wall he's behind or what software he's using or what's going on, but he has the ability to do this. He also has the ability to delete the emails that he sends me from his computer. He can delete them from my mail account. So that part alone, is freaky. I've asked him a ton of times, tons of times, to step forward and to tell me his real name, which his favorite thing to say to me is, "You don't understand how this works. You don't understand how this works." So he clearly doesn't feel as though he can step forward, which drives me crazy, because I think if you really want to bring credibility to something, be counted. Stand up and be counted. As hard as it is for me to kind of report on all this weird stuff that I'm seeing with Powell and that I'm experiencing myself, if it's truthful, then, the truth should hold no fear. Stand up and say what is going on. So I don't like it. I don't like that Daniel David Skyfall uses the name Daniel David Skyfall. It just creates doubt in me. So much so that last December I had sent him an email really kind of, driving home this point and saying that as much as you want me to look at the information that you've given me and you want me to believe that you're real, I need something to know that you are real. In which, if you follow me on Facebook, you'll remember that at the very end of January, I had received a message from him saying, okay, you want proof. He said, start watching in the coming months, start watching all of the mainstream media channels. There's about to be a windfall of UFO stories in relation to the military. Now, right after that happened, I went straight to you guys and I said, here is the prediction of Daniel David Skyfall. In the coming months, we're supposed to watch, all the major media channels, because he's saying we're going to see a bunch of stories about, UFOs and the military and all this stuff. And man, Jesus, he was, you can't get any more accurate than he got. There was, if you guys have been watching the news, there's been non-stop stories about UFOs, whether it's, 5 pilots came out to the New York Times to talk about their experience. Pilots are now briefing the Senate. There was a story about how the Navy is updating their protocol for reporting UFOs. There's been more stories about short burst radio waves coming from space and not knowing where they're coming from. There's been more interviews with different pilots. There's countless TV shows now that are coming out about this. There was just a massive landslide of UFO stories, as he predicted. Now I'm sitting here going, how could he have done that? How could he have done that? How could he have known? How could he have said, right now, start watching, it's about to happen? And then it happens. Then it happens. So yeah, I was like, now you got my attention. Now you got my attention. Because in Two-Face to Gray, what he said to me is, I know what's going on with you. I know what's going on with Craig. And he gave this incredibly detailed story in which basically it was kind of like a preemptive warning story. Like, he said there are 3 things that we've done, mankind has done, that were major fuck-ups, basically. Obviously, one was the nuclear proliferation. The idea that, we've blown up, over 3,000 nukes, all over the world. And when I say blown up, I mean in the sky. There was so much stuff I didn't know that I just learned through that. Like, I had no idea that we were blowing up nukes above Antarctica in outer space. Really, really fascinating stuff in Two-Face the Gray. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll leave a link down below where you can order the DVD as well. But it is fascinating, the stuff that Daniel David Skyfall shared, especially the stuff about Antarctica. But anyways, the quick kind of 1, 2, 3 is he said nukes were a big mistake. We're on the dawn of artificial intelligence, which is going to be a huge, huge mistake, he says. And then he talked about something called the Skyfall conspiracy, which I had never heard of before. And what he explained is that these oil companies, as they start drilling deeper and deeper and deeper for oil, that the Earth's crust is only so deep, and that eventually they'll get to the point where they actually puncture it. And he's saying that this has occurred, and once this has occurred, he's actually somewhere in northern Siberia, he's saying this occurred. The Earth's core releases a ton of gas, basically, into the upper atmosphere, and it destroys our ozone, it destroys, all the natural components that keep everything bad from the sun, from space, everything, off the planet. And he's saying that when this happened, one of the first signs were that rocks would start falling from the sky. And then there was this footage, like in Turkey, and other footage where rocks would fall from the sky. And then there was this footage of clouds and storms. This is stuff he sent me, of clouds and storms that were at ground level. And he was showing all the ways that we're manufacturing weather now, and that weather is completely controlled because once the oil companies punctured the crust of the Earth, they have no way to fix it. They have no way to fix it. It's just like that major oil spill that took place, the Deepwater Horizon. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but that thing was never fixed. That oil is still spilling out in the Gulf, still to this day. That was not fixed. And if you think I'm lying about this, there's all kinds of documentaries about it, all kinds of footage of people living in New Orleans that have been completely fucked up in their health because they're breathing these chemicals that the government is putting in the water to make the oil sink so nobody can see it. But this is like a real thing that's happening. The same thing is going on with the Fukushima reactor that exploded, that major meltdown. That thing is just getting worse and worse and worse. They've not fixed the problem. They've not capped it. The cores have fallen into the earth. It is spilling out an ungodly amount of radiation right now, which they say is hitting the West Coast right now, which is great, from the upper atmosphere. So essentially, in a nutshell, in the movie Two-Face the Gray, Skyfall is laying out all of these things that we have done to destroy the planet, to the point where we're already past the can we fix it part. Like, we have destroyed this planet, and it is just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And he's saying, essentially, that's why all these, billionaires, want to get off the planet and want to go to Mars. And that's why there's this massive rush to do so, which it is very odd that the super wealthy and the super powerful, they all have two things: they need to get off this planet, and they've all got a bunker in New Zealand. What am I talking about? There's this town in New Zealand. You guys can Google this as well. There's this town in New Zealand that's a small, tiny town that's broke as hell. The people that live there can barely survive. That everybody from Peter Thiel to Elon Musk, all of these guys have underground bunkers in this one town that they bought. Supposedly 38 of them. And they don't go there. They're just sitting there in case shit hits the fan. So, what you clearly get from the kind of Skyfall story, now I'm not saying that everything he said in here can be right or proven. I even say that in the movie. I said there'd be no way for me to verify this amount of information. But one thing is very clear, which is that we're in trouble when it comes to this planet. There are some really, really scary issues that are going on. And, eventually we're going to have to come to terms with that. and figure out what are we going to do. But Skyfall says there's a bigger issue before that, which is as long as we're going to be on this planet, the people that run two things, the energy companies of the world and the industrial military complex, those two people, or those two groups of people, they do not want us to have advancement in 0-point energy, or basically, they don't want us off oil. That's what it comes down to. They don't want us off oil because it controls and runs the world. Everything is operated on oil. It's that old Rockefeller saying, he who controls the money controls everything. Period. So if suddenly tomorrow an alien species introduced to us 0-point energy, or a way to power the world without any cost associated, then the power of the energy elite in the industrial military complex would dissipate overnight. And they don't want that. Okay? And that's what, Skyfall is saying. So he is saying that they want to convince America that there is an alien invasion coming, but he's saying that the reason they want to do this is because there's a real alien invasion coming. So before that happens, they want to get the world on their side and everybody uniting together, so when they do go to war with this extraterrestrial presence, that they have the full support of the globe. Again, initially, this sounds crazy until you start watching footage of Ronald Reagan talking to the United Nations, saying exactly that, and Bill Clinton saying it, basically saying, I often wonder how quickly our differences would disappear if we all faced a threat from an extraterrestrial race. Because they're right. If, Earth and humankind were facing a threat from an extraterrestrial race, we would suddenly come together, and our differences would seem small. So Daniel David Skyfall is saying that this is all actually playing out, that there's going to be a real alien invasion. Now, because of that, because the energy elite and the industrial military complex do not want them here, do not want them introducing new technology, and do not trust them, do not want them taking over, they want the world, humankind, on their side when they decide to go to war with these extraterrestrials. To me, it sounds completely ignorant, because my guess is if extraterrestrials can get here, from whatever planet they're on, they have technology that completely blows us away. I mean, my guess would be they can destroy us in a blip. I don't know why they're not thinking this, but I also don't know what they know. So, my communication with Daniel David Skyfall is so limited because he controls it. Back in December, when I heard from him, and I posted in January, his last communication was the prediction about the forthcoming press that's coming. I have not heard from him since until last week, in which this time it was a longer email than it usually is, and he was making all kinds of predictions. Now, some of the stuff I'm just not comfortable saying because, man, there's some things in there that if I put it out there, I'm pretty damn sure I'd be getting knocks on my door. But there are some interesting things that he said that I wanted to share, because we should all be able to gauge this as well, And believe me, the first time that I put his predictions out there, what I thought was, this is going to make an ass out of me. I'm going to find out now that this is just some fan that's just been talking bullshit and messing with me. And then, like I said, the opposite happened, and his predictions came true. But he gave several predictions in this new email. One was that, I thought this was interesting, is that it was decided that Trump will be the right guy to basically inform the world that we have made contact with an extraterrestrial presence. He said that it's been decided that Trump will serve a second term. which implies that regardless of what we vote, someone's already decided who's going to be president. He talked a lot about the fact that it's not a coincidence that, Tom DeLonge and Trump, two entertainers who are essentially two actors, were the ones that were selected to essentially usher in disclosure, which is very interesting if you think about that. It's really, really interesting that at this critical time in kind of like the whole alien disclosure agenda, that who would have ever guessed that, Tom DeLonge of Blink-182 and Donald Trump, would be the voices that usher this in. But what Skyfall is saying is that it's been decided that Trump will serve a second term. Now, when he says they, I'm assuming he's talking about the global elite, whoever they are, which I hate that. I hate that. God, I hate the secrecy of it all. I hate the they. I hate the they. You know what I mean? Like, who the fuck is they? But it is what it is. So he's saying that Trump will serve a second term, and that in his second term, which is, would be 2020, it would start. He's saying that in his second term, it will be announced that we have made contact with an intelligent extraterrestrial life form. He also said in the coming months, and I don't know if that means 6, 10, 12, he said that there will be legislation introduced to basically, put a larger budget into, basically investigating the sky, UFOs, and also to try to contact other life forms. So my guess is that would happen first, and then, Trump would come forward and say, yeah, we made contact. So I thought that was fascinating. But he also said in here, and this is the part, there's so much about this that I'm just nervous to say everything that's in here. But essentially, he's saying that there will, how can I say this? Fuck, I'm just nervous about saying this. There will be a war in the Middle East that basically on the eve of this war happening, there will be an interruption of the war by what he is saying will be fake alien intervention. Now, in my email back to him, I said, can you be more specific? So I know what he's talking about, and I haven't heard back from him since I emailed back. But he's saying that there's going to be a war in the Middle East, or a pending war, because on the eve of this war, there will be extraterrestrial intervention, but it will be fake. It will not be real. And part of this message that he talked about how that none of these heads of these countries, whether it be, Putin or Trump or, Xi or, like any of these guys, he's essentially saying it's like pro wrestling, I mean, they're all actually on the same team. They're all working together. And basically what they do is manufacture distraction as the real event, whatever that is, goes on. Now, let me be the first to say this. Part of the reason I never wanted to go down this road in the beginning is because this shit sounds so crazy. I know this. But I also know I can't tell you how many times throughout this entire process something has seemed crazy to me. And then I find out that it's definitively true. And it's just like, Jesus, like, what isn't possible in this world? Now, if I thought for a second, guys, that Daniel David Skyfall was, truthfully full of shit, and it was just somebody that's messing with me, I would have stopped telling you guys about his predictions after, the first time that I posted them. But it came true, guys. I mean, it came true. You can go back and look on my Facebook page. I literally came on and said, like, look, guys, I don't know if this is real or not. This is what he's saying. This is his prediction. Let's see how accurate he is. And he was bullseyes. You tell me how that's possible. How is that possible? I mean, like 2 days after he wrote this, was this story about these short wave radio bursts that they picked up, through space. And then, like only like a month after that was, a story about, David Fravor and these new sightings that occurred. And that's the thing too, that I really want to stress this too. When you guys watch, or see these stories, like the 5 pilots for the New York Times came forward to talk about their experiences, which, by the way, what's really crazy about the New York Times story is we went from Tom DeLonge saying, here's 3 videos of 3 events, and yeah, ATIP existed. That's the agency that, investigated these things. And yes, occasionally, they would have cases that were really weird they would check out, and they didn't know what things were. And then you find out in the New York Times story that between 2014 and 2015, that naval aviators were intercepting and making contact with UFOs on a near daily basis. A near daily basis, okay? Now, what's really fascinating about this is those stories, and I can't stress how important this is, in the overall picture of all this, okay? Those stories are planted by the Department of Defense and okayed by Trump. You don't just have 5 military naval aviators, in which 2 of them are active, that come forward to the New York Times and talk about in great detail, their contact with UFOs and their interactions. Like, trust me, no naval aviator showed back up to work the next day and told, their commanding officer or their general, oh, by the way, General, I just happened to talk to the New York Times yesterday, and it slipped, that I, had this experience with a UFO, but, and I told them that, for 2 years, we pretty much had these sightings daily. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't just come out. Like, these things are well planned, well discussed, and Trump has to okay these things. These stories are planted and placed by the Pentagon. 100%. And I saw George Stephanopoulos asked Trump about the naval aviators and the UFO sightings. And his response was, yeah, those guys are trained, to know what's up in the air. And, we don't know what it is yet, but we're going to have more on it soon. So this is being talked about at the highest levels. None of that's an accident. None of that is an accident. So when Skyfall starts predicting stuff and it starts coming true, I sit back and go, well, the only way he could have known that this litany of stories were about to come out is if he had some connection to the inner workings of the Department of Defense. He would have to. Because there's no other way he would have known. There's no other way. Because of that, I tell you about his current predictions. That's why. He says it's already been decided that Trump is going to serve a second term, that Trump will in fact be the person that first tells America we have made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials, that it will happen in his second term, and then on the eve of a war in the Middle East, there will be fake alien intervention. Now, I don't know if that's to set the stage for this, big fake invasion they're talking about, or if it's to, create an overall, collective, thought process against or for extraterrestrials. I had a lot of questions, and I emailed Mr. Skyfall all of these questions back. I said, I want to know, who's they? Can you tell me one person that makes up they, besides, the energy elite or the industrial military complex? Is there one name that makes up they? Who is it? George Soros, right? Can some people say that? Is there other names that I need to look at or look up? Can you give me one name? And I asked, okay, war in the Middle East. I asked, war with who? Something the U.S. is involved with? I'm assuming, since they're saying Trump is going to be the one saying that we've made contact with an intelligent extraterrestrial race. Who would in the Middle East would be going to war for this to happen? There's probably 15 questions that I sent him back, and I have not heard back yet, and I won't until he decides he's ready. And that's what's really hard about the conversations with Daniel David Skyfall as well, is I don't control anything. He just gets a hold of me. And the weird thing I've asked myself over and over again, and I really hope to understand this, is why me? Why me? Sir No Face was a paranormal ghost documentary. But something weird is going on, because not only did Daniel David Skyfall get a hold of me, so did the tattoo-faced man. And if you watch, Two-Face the Gray, you guys see how well this is documented. The tattoo-faced man was there. We have photos of him. I have his package. I went through all of it. And there's crazy stuff in there. And all roads point back to Australia. All roads point back to Australia. So why did both of these people at once decide to get a hold of me? Now, the tattoo-faced man says, well, because nobody knows you and you're my insurance policy. That shit sounds like movie talk to me. You know what I mean? Not that I didn't believe him when I was, talking to him. So I've said many times, he seemed honest. He just seemed scared. But I don't understand why they get a hold of me. Maybe it's because I wasn't a UFO documentarian. I would like to believe it's because through my documentaries, they would see that my documentaries are a window into a world where I'm not driving the narrative. They're very raw for a reason. Footage has no agenda. My goal when I make documentaries is to simply document the event and have you decide what you think about it. If that wasn't my goal, we'd have never shot American Ghost Hunter the way we did. Because many people could have just as easily said, Chad, you're not helping your family, you're hurting them. You're creating drama and a nightmare situation. That could have been possible. Thankfully no one saw it that way, but it's possible. I wasn't interested in how I looked, in any of that. If I look bad, I look bad, and that means at that time I look bad. And if that's what happens when I make a documentary, then so be it. So it's the same thing with Sir No Face. Had Craig, been lying about Sir No Face, he knew before we ever started filming that if that were the case, then that was coming out. And that's what I would show people. So I feel the same way, now with, obviously Two-Face. A lot of this stuff in the documentary, it was uncomfortable to put it in there because a lot of it just seems so far out there. So I'd love to believe that these guys got a hold of me because they said, look, he'll tell the truth. But I'm not really clear as to why they have both come to me. Maybe it's because, I was able, to prove that Craig and those guys didn't fake that footage. And they didn't. And we were able to prove that. If you look at all of the events around that case, our reconstructions, getting Danny Patterson involved, You know, the one thing we know about Craig and the Sir No Face footage is that he filmed something, and that wasn't human. It's an entity. You know, so I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I toss and turn with this, guys. This is why it's so important for me to get back to Australia. Why is Daniel David Skyfall sending me all this information? I don't know. Maybe he knows that it needs to start out in a place like this, and he sees me as a good foundation to launch information that, certainly deserves to go viral. I don't know. I have to find out the answer for that still. But I sincerely hope that you guys will keep watching and keep sharing what you see with everybody. Because things are really weird. There's a lot of really weird stuff going on. Especially with Craig. He's dealing with a lot. I mean, I've had a lot of weird stuff happen here too in the way of surveillance, but Craig has really, he's been really going through some strange stuff, man. And you guys will see, a lot more of that stuff in Phantom Rider, which, again, I just want to reiterate that the online date is being pushed back 1 month to July 28th, which is the DVD date. So, having said that, guys, if you haven't seen Two-Face to Grey, again, I'll put the link below. I would love to know all of your thoughts about all of this, guys. I would love to know your thoughts. So please let me know what you think in the comments. Like I said, there's no wrong opinions, man. So I would love to know your thoughts about all of this. And thanks for dealing with the upload schedule being kind of weird right now. Like I said, I hope to find a way to solve that. And I think, hopefully part of the answer is going to be, these In a Crowded Room side series events, which I'm really excited about. And once again, click the link below where you can go and purchase the 10-episode, 20-hour-long American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details audio series that is coming out on July 4th. That will be episode 1, and there will be a new episode emailed to you every single week for 10 weeks. Like I said, in the next 24 hours, if you get it right now, you can save $10 on the overall price of all 10 episodes. And thank you guys for the support. Keep supporting. I'm going to get back to editing tonight because I really feel good about the future of this overall series. And, we're going to find out a lot in July, but I'll be documenting all of it for you guys to see. If things go right, this story that a lot of people know about will soon be known throughout the world. And that is my goal. I'm not stopping until that happens, because it has to happen. So thank you guys once again for listening to episode number 66 of the In a Crowded Room podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with more. All the best.